Well, welcome everybody to Stoughton's annual Veterans Day Parade. This parade is, or this date, this Veterans Day is very special as it is the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, as I'm sure most of you know. You've probably all remember from your history class the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And at exactly 11 o'clock today, to that moment, it will be the 100-year anniversary of the end of World War I. And, you know, we have some speakers who will be able to speak about that probably much better than I can. So, we are going to start our ceremonies here, as we always do, with an opening number from our high school band. Thank you, our award-winning high school band. I would now like to call on Selectman Christine Howe for our opening invocation.
Detail uncover.
God of the ages, we thank you for all who have served in the armed forces of this country. We thank you for the freedom their sacrifice has earned and guarded for us. Help us to prize this freedom and use it well. We ask you to bless all living veterans in a special way today, as well as the families of all veterans. Comfort those who grieve for those who gave the last full measure of devotion. Strengthen those who bear physical, emotional, and spiritual wounds. Stand with those who provide care to them. Move us to reach out to sisters and brothers who are veterans or relatives of veterans or who currently serve in the military. We pray for the day when no one needs to serve in the military. Help us to live now in anticipation of that day as people who long for peace, who pray for peace, and who seek to be peacemakers in this world. Amen.
Detail cover.
Thank you. Thank you, Selectman Howe. I am going to read a proclamation from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts before we get into our main speakers. But first, while our last World War I veteran passed into history back in 2011, we do have World War II veterans, and I would like to acknowledge them. I see Joe DeVito over there. Do we have any other World War II veterans? Because I'd like to acknowledge them here today. It's a cold day and a windy day, so that certainly affects some of the attendance. Let me now read a proclamation from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. A proclamation. Whereas, since the Commonwealth's colonial days, thousands of men and women have served our country in defense of freedom and liberty, and whereas, on November 11th, 1918, the armistice was signed in the forest of Compiègne by the Allied nations in Germany, ending World War I, the war to end all wars after 4 years of conflict. And whereas, since that day, every November, people from around the nation have gathered to honor our veterans. And whereas there are approximately 388,000 veterans living in Massachusetts, and whereas today we are reminded of the great sacrifices and contributions our veterans have made to our country, and whereas we honor and salute those who served our country throughout generations with honor, patriotism, and courage, and whereas it is appropriate that all Massachusetts citizens remember the bravery of those who served their country so that their dedication and sacrifices serve as a reminder of the cost of our freedom, and whereas in November 2018, the world will commemorate the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended the fighting in World War I at 11 a.m., November 11th, 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Now therefore, I, Charles D. Baker, Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2018 to be Veterans Day, and urge all the citizens of the Commonwealth to take cognizance of this event and participate fittingly in its observance. Given at the Executive Chamber in Boston, this 11th day of November in the year 2018, in the independence of the United States of America, the 242nd, by His Excellency Charles D. Baker, Governor of the Commonwealth, Karen E. Polito, Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth, and William Francis Galvin, Secretary of the Commonwealth. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I would now like to call on Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Bob O'Regan, who will say a few words on this occasion.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's observance of Veterans Day. I'd like to thank the high school marching band once again for coming out and helping us with this observation, our award-winning band. A round of applause for them. To our award-winning veterans agent, Mike Pizzara, for once again putting together this observation of a tremendously important day for our country and our community. But most of all, I want to thank the veterans who are here and who cannot be here for your service to our country, and for many of you, your continued service to our community. Mike asked me if I could speak as long as selectmen meeting go on, which I told them the firing squad would use live ammunition, so probably not. But I appreciate this opportunity to say a few words about today, its importance, and about our veterans and the community. I learned this morning from our fire chief that Northampton canceled their Veterans Day parade because they don't have enough veterans who are able to march, and the interest in the community is not sufficient to continue observing. That's a sad thing. So it's especially gratifying, I think, especially to the veterans, to see the outpouring of support today. Let's keep this up. and let's make next year's attendance deeper and better. We have 3 national celebrations of our country and observances of our country. The 4th of July is a day when we celebrate the values our country was formed with. Veterans Day is a day when we give thanks to those who allow us today to continue enjoying the freedoms that they fought for. And Memorial Day is the day when we remember those who sacrificed everything to allow us to have these things. Today is our day to honor all veterans. And I think those of us who might be a little cold, a little uncomfortable, those of us who were able to go to school and be away from home, let's think about the men and women who served us. The level of uncomfort that we're feeling today in the cold was nothing, and they served. The level of loneliness we may feel when we're away from home was nothing, and they served. The level of commitment that they gave was everything anyone could. There was a book written by Laurie Anderson several years ago. The title of it was The Impossible Knife of Memory. And she wrote about conversations with her father and his service. One thing she observed is that many veterans come home and they don't talk a lot about their experience. Her father didn't either. But he said one thing about service, and particularly in wartime. Killing people is easier than it should be. And then he put on his beret and said, staying alive is harder. So all of us who are here today should remember that those of us who are here and those veterans who can't be here, that was their life experience, and they're back among us. In Stoughton, we honor that service and we honor that memory of community members who went off to serve us. We honor it because we have a tradition in this town of naming our streets after veterans. And then every year on Memorial Day and sometimes on Veterans Day, we dedicate squares to men and women who served, who came back from service in the military and continue to serve our community. Service is a continuing theme here. Why did they serve? We hear a simple phrase, they served to preserve or protect the American way of life. And let's ask ourselves, what does that mean? Do we really understand their sacrifice? What did they give us by the sacrifice? They gave us a freedom to learn, to grow, and to be better as a country. During our lifetime, during my lifetime, we've seen evolution in civil rights. We've seen evolution in understanding one another. That's a right that was protected for my generation because of World War II, and the generation ahead of that by World War I. Another veteran put it this way: I am a veteran, as are most of my personal friends. A veteran is someone who at one point in their lives wrote a blank check payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including their lives. Regardless of personal or political views, there are way too many people in this country who no longer remember that fact. Let's us continue to remember that fact. Let's us, when we see veterans and those in service, thank them for their service. And when we go out our daily lives, let's remember and honor their service by acting that way, by participating. The easiest way for us to honor service by our veterans is to take a few minutes and vote. Each of us can contribute to our community to make our community better. Coaching, town meeting, various ways. That's a way to honor what our veterans have done for us, for the freedom and liberty they give us. Let's do it. Let's all find our way, because As we live a good life as good Americans, we say thank you to the veterans who give us that privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Selectman O'Regan. As he has many times pointed out, it's O'Regan pronounced the Democratic way, as he says. Speaking of Democrats, I'd like to now introduce from our State House of Representatives, recently re-elected State Representative Bill Galvin, who would like to say a few words.
Good morning, all. I'll try to make this brief because you're all very cold out there. But my remarks this morning are both for myself and for State Representative Louis Kafka and Senator Timilty. Both of them would have liked to have been here, but were unable to make it. Good morning. It is always an honor to say a few words on Veterans Day. Thank you to Mike Pizzara for assisting Stoughton veterans every day and for coordinating today's events. We come together as a nation on Veterans Day to express our profound gratitude for the contributions that servicemen and women have made to our nation and for the sacrifices your families made when you were away from home. We are grateful for your dedication in defending our great nation and the example you set for your fellow Americans. This Veterans Day is extra special because the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. At the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, the armistice was signed, ending the First World War. The war lasted 4 years and left 17 million dead, including 17 men from Stoughton. 12 of these men are buried in France. Prior to the conscription, these men were employed by the local factories that manufactured items including rubber and shoe components. 6 of these men settled in Stoughton after immigrating to the United States from Ireland, Scotland, England, Sweden, Russia, and Greece. As we recognize the contributions of all veterans today, we also have the opportunity to reflect on the long tradition of military service in Stoughton, and these 17 men in particular. And I want to conclude by recognizing all of those among us today who have served in our military. Whether you are a veteran on active duty, a guardsman, or a reservist, this country owes you a debt of gratitude for your service. Thank you, and stay warm.
Thank you, Representative Galvin. I would now like to call on our main speaker today. I'm honored to have him here. He is often seen maybe on a local TV show. I'm sure a lot of you have seen him before. Professor Gary Highlander, who will speak on World War I.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Stoughton, land of the free and home of the brave. And thank you for inviting me this morning to speak a little bit about the history of the Great War of 1914, 1918, and the role of our president and the role of Stoughton, Massachusetts. I was just reminded, that 17 men from Stoughton died during the First World War. They did not lose their lives. It's always good to point this out. These men did not lose their lives. They gave their lives that the nation might live. And it's always best to remember that, and also for all of those who served in this country, present and past. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to begin in 1914. In 1914, when the Great War erupted in late autumn or late August, late September of 1914, no one expected that the war would continue for 4 more years. When Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany sent the troops off, that he reminded the nation of Germany that this will be over by the time the leaves fly. He meant November of 1914. He had the month right. He simply had the wrong date. 1918, the Great War. Why was it known as the Great War? There's nothing great about war, but it was known as the Great War because it was a global war. More than 30 nations were involved. The world had never seen this. It was called the Great War. It was the first industrial war. It was the first high-tech war. And it was a war that turned all of Europe into a bloody battleground. The mud of the trenches, both on the eastern and western front. New weapons of destruction, a high-tech war, an industrial war. U-boats, fighter planes, tanks, flamethrowers, the machine gun. And if you take a moment and think about that word, and if I break it for you, the machine gun, a machine designed to bring death and efficiencies were one of the primary concerns of the Industrial Revolution in the textile mills of the Boston area. The efficiency of the machine gun, if it were fully efficient, 600 rounds per minute, 600 dead, perhaps 600 wounded. The efficiencies of the war, long-range artillery, and worst of all, the most heinous new weapon, the poison gas, phosgene, mustard gas, chlorine gas. This was a wicked, wicked war. No one was prepared for this. And I want to give all of you a little bit of homework and to recommend a book, to recommend a novel. And it should be read frequently. And it is All Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Remarque. And whether you read this in the 8th grade or you read this when you're 80 years old, even though it's from the German perspective, it's a perspective of all those who served on the Western Front. United States, France, Britain, and so forth. I mean, it is a book that is captivating and frightening in the same phrase. So as that war began in 1914, and Woodrow Wilson recently elected as president, Woodrow Wilson called upon the American people. He called upon the people of Massachusetts. He called upon the men and women of Stoughton, Massachusetts as well, to remain impartial in thought as well as in action. This is an old world war, and we do not want to get involved. For President Wilson, he wished to be the peacemaker, the honest broker, that America will be a moral force in the world and not a military force. And I want to help the nations of Europe resolve this resolve this diplomatically. They wanted no part of it. Absolutely. We want to win, and we want to win in a major way. That this is a war as British propaganda absolutely swamped this country. This is a war. This is a battle of civilizations. These are the values of the Teutonic world competing with the values of the Anglo-Saxon world. This is not a simple war. This is a war between monarchy and popular democracy. This is a war between regimentation and individualism. This is a war between militarism and militarism and a peace conference, to be able to talk around the table, to have a benign world. This is no ordinary war. We are not fighting Germans. We are fighting Huns, the descendants of Attila the Hun. Nothing has been seen like this in the world. And they urge Wilson, join us to protect the rights of the Anglo-Saxon tradition, liberty, democracy, the right to choose, the right to serve, the privilege to serve, as opposed to being regimented and to be authoritarian. Join us. And Wilson, I want to be a peacemaker. You know, Wilson was raised between the pulpit, between the Bible and the dictionary. His father was a minister. His father was a man of the word. And Wilson sat in those services. and his dad telling his congregation that we all have a responsibility to one another, to preserve the peace, to save lives, to participate in a popular democracy. And Wilson later on, as I said, raised between the Bible and the dictionary. You know, Wilson, a scholar. You know, Wilson, a professor at Johns Hopkins, and later on president of Princeton University. And the power of the word, the written and the spoken word. That Wilson was as much a wordsmith as the great Thomas Jefferson. And then Wilson elected to the presidency in 1912. And we want no part of this war. That we will be impartial in thought as well as in action. And I want to be the peacemaker. I want to be a peace broker. I want to end this. But it didn't happen that way. And in 1916 and into 1917, 4 events persuaded Wilson, you know, that we need to put troops on the ground. You know, we need to, if I am going to make certain that this is the war to end all wars. Remember that phrase? We all remember that phrase. And that I need to commit American troops, Yanks, doughboys. And what were those 4 events that persuaded Wilson that we need to go to war? That the new world must save the old world, and that we need to carry to the old world the promises of Jefferson. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No guarantees. The pursuit of happiness. And of those 4 events, you thought I lost my way, didn't you? Number 1, the German government in 1917, January, February, resuming unrestricted submarine warfare. Any ship from any nation found in the war zone approaching the British Isles will be sunk on sight without warning, regardless of nationality, regardless of the flag you might be flying. Secondly, that the German government, you know, sent a secret telegram, the Zimmerman note, the Zimmerman telegram, to the government of Mexico, urging them, imploring them to attack the United States across the Rio Grande. Why? If you attack the United States across the Rio Grande, that when we win our war, you and Mexico will have a seat at the conference table, and you will get all that land back that the Americans stole from you in the Mexican-American War of 1846. You'll get back Arizona, parts of Utah, New Mexico, parts of Southern California. Join us. And that telegram was intercepted. It was very quickly translated and shocked the country. It shocked Wilson. And for the British, you see what we're up against here? You must help us. Thirdly, the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution in 1917 swept the Romanov dynasty from power. 4 empires were destroyed at the end of World War I. The Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the German Empire. And for Wilson, a student of democracy, and that second great phrase from his declaration of war, that we need to make the world safe for democracy. Stay with me here. That with the end of the Romanov dynasty, the 300-year-old Romanov dynasty, and it appeared as if constitutional government might replace autocracy in Russia, that we have the good guys of the world, the democratic powers of the world, the French, the British, and the Russians are coming to join us as a constitutional monarchy, fighting the authoritarian regimes of the world, the Hohenzollern Empire, the Turkish Empire, the Habsburg Empire. So it's unrestricted submarine warfare, the Zimmerman note, the Russian Revolution, and for Wilson, it's time to call America to war. And in April of 1917, Wilson reluctantly calling the nation to war, the war to end all war, so that your children and your children's children and those unborn generations will not be slaughtered in the battlefields of a highly technological war. We cannot do this again. Look at the death. Let me give you a number. Let me give you a number to hang your hat on. 40 million people were either killed or wounded in the Great War. On the American side, America deployed 4 million men, 2 million of whom were deployed to the Western Front. In November of 1918, 10,000 American doughboys per day were landing in France. And on their lips, these corn-fed boys, big boys, Michigan, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, it goes on and on and on, that on their lips as they came down the gangplank was the phrase, Lafayette, Lafayette, nous voici. Lafayette, we are here. We are here to repay the great favor of France when you came to aid us in our revolution against Britain. Lafayette, nous voici. We are proud to serve. We are proud to return the favor and to protect you against the Hun, the Boche. To the front, to the front. And our commander, Blackjack Pershing, and he got the name Blackjack because he commanded black soldiers on the Mexican-American border in the 1900s. And Blackjack Pershing was absolutely adamant that American soldiers are going to have their own section of the front. They're not going to be used as fodder to fill in the units, British, French, Italian units, and so forth, that had been bled down by war on the Western Front. We have our piece of the front. And we remember the names, don't we? Belleau Wood. We remember the Chateau Thierry, the Meuse Argonne, where American servicemen distinguished themselves with great gallantry. American deaths at the end of the war, 126,000 dead, 234,000 wounded. And we must not forget, and there were 3 or 4 men from Stoughton, fatalities of the war, not to bullets, but to that terrible Spanish influenza that was a global influenza that took the lives of 20 million people as well. I've heard it several times already. The 11th day, the 11th month, the 11th hour, all quiet on the Western Front. And yet, up until the very end, officers were sending their men over the top. In the military have a phrase for this. It's called snafu. Not everyone gets the word. So here we have men going over the top at 10:30, 10:45, minutes before the armistice, minutes before the ceasefire. And imagine being shot down at 10:59, seconds before the all quiet on the Western Front. And the Great War is over. The Great War, the Great Adventure, as many called it. And Americans came home. Wilson went to Europe. Wilson went to Europe to attend and to be the United States representative at the Paris Peace Conference, to write peace treaties with Germany, with Turkey, with Bulgaria, and so forth. And that this must be, again, the war to end all wars. And Wilson's great goal, the crown jewel of his 14 points, to diffuse the causes of war, the great goal was the League of Nations, that of all the nations of the world will join the League of Nations, and we can sit and discuss our problems rather than another dreadful war. As he said to Georges Clemenceau of France and David Lloyd George of Great Britain, if there is another war like this, it will be 10 times as disastrous. And unless we write a revolutionary peace treaty, and by that he meant a treaty in which there are no winners, that everybody sits around the table, that there is no traditional peace treaty where the victors beat up on the losers. And Wilson said, read your history. In the history of the world, it's always been the victors beat up on the losers. And what do the losers do? They want revenge. They want retaliation. And another war, and another war, and another war. We need to break the process. This must be a peace treaty. This must be the end of the war where there are no victors. There are those gathered around the table to make certain this is the war to end all wars. And this is Wilson. An idealist? You bet. A romantic? You bet. A man who some people criticized him, for being simply unrealistic. that works as well. The United States never joined the League of Nations. And in my view, that even if we had joined the League of Nations, it probably would not have prevented a Second World War. You know, when Wilson left Europe, you know, he told those who were gathered there, if we do not accept my 14 points, disarm, open alliances, you know, that we provide freedom to the people of southeastern Europe, there will be another war in 20 years. He wasn't reading tea leaves. He wasn't being an Old Testament prophet. He simply was looking at the sequence. Read your Bible. Read your history. When nations are defeated, they seek revenge. If you have a victor's peace here, you will have another war, and he nailed it. You will have another war in 20 years. And he said that in 1919. And Europe broke into war in September of 1939, 20 years later. So this was not the war, to end all wars. And America came home, and America said, Europe's going to blow again, and this time we're not going to be dragged in. That we were dragged in by British propaganda that we are fighting Huns, and that you must join us. The mother country is in peril. You must join us. We have a common history, a common language, common hymns, common traditions. And Wilson, you're going to have another war in 20 years. The United States slipped into isolationism. Not complete, but we want no part of Europe again. That Europe is going to blow, and we're not going to get pulled in again to this. And we know what happened, as I just said, in 1939. And Franklin Roosevelt will keep his distance as long as he can. And that, if I could take a great jump here, that the United States in 41 December, that we were bombed into World War II. That American isolationism was cracked at Pearl Harbor. So there are lessons here. There's good history here. We've always been a nation that's been upbeat, land of the free, home of the brave. Those wonderful empowering words of the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and we treasure the preamble to the Constitution. We the people, not we the monarchy, not we the aristocracy, not we the church, we the people, in order to perform, or in order to extend the privileges of citizenship, a more perfect union, and to be able to extend to one another the blessings of liberty. Read the preamble. It is the mission statement of this country, written in 1787, 1788 by those delegates at Philadelphia. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union. And that wonderful closing phrase, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves, the generation of 1787, and to our posterity. And all of us are the posterity from that Declaration of Independence. Let me say it again. To extend the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. So as we gather this morning to honor the veterans of the Great War, and to honor all veterans, all men and women, have served, so that this nation might remain free, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Always we will remember. Always we will be prepared. Always we will be proud, so that we will always be free. Thank you, and God bless America.
Thank you, Gary. Very, very well spoken. Very well done. Thank you very much. As is tradition here in Stoughton, I will now call on Mark Hauserman, as we do not only on Memorial Day, but on Veterans Day. We will call the roll of all those Stoughton veterans who have made the ultimate sacrifice.
Thank you, Mike.
World War II. Daniel Bento. William Bissett. Carl W. Buschenfeld. Francis R. Cabral. Gerald H. Chapman. Herbert J. Chipman. Robert E. Chisholm. Walter E. Davis. Michael F. Dean. William L. Deedy. Kenneth P. Donahue. Anthony J. Gonzalez. Samuel Gregerman. Edward J. Gashora. Edgar A. Hallidan. John J. Halloran. William P. Horan. Alphonse Cada. Henry V. LaHoven. Earl B. Leathers. Daniel Mahoney Jr. Zygmunt Poskus. Joseph E. Smith. Francis J. Texera. Herbert Trowbridge. Sidney B. Valley. John J. Wafinski. Thomas S. Eston. Korean War. Philip C. Farnham. Richard G. King. John A. Leland. Christy E. Murphy. Vietnam conflict. Simone J. Bergeron. Kevin Clancy. Paul Zawanka. William Joyce. Paul McEachran. Peter Mears. Michael Schumann. James G. Signet. Gary Guest. George Evans. And now to honor those who served in the Great War that ended 100 years ago, those from World War I. William J. Buckley. Herbert L. Cornell. Cornelius E. Corbett. George E. Flynn. James Frazier. Joseph R. Green. Frank W. Kennedy. Frederick Larson. Ralph R. Malcolm. John E. Mara. Ray Marden. James F. Marin. John McGarvey. Burton L. Mincy. Michael Romanek. George C. Smith. Nicholas Spalas. Lester A. Witten. Michael P. Nikon.
We'll now call on our Sergeant at Arms to assist with our wreath laying. It is now approximately 11 o'clock, 10:58. At this moment, across not only the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but across the country, cities, towns, small communities are ringing their memorial bell 21 times in honor and respect of those who fought in World War I in a memory. Just give some thought to that. Right now, to the moment, is the 100th year anniversary of the end of World War I. So I would ask if you could all stand at attention and pay your respects as we ring the memorial bell 21 times.
Detail, precinct, home. Order, home.
Honor God. Prepare to honor the dead.
Detail, praise and home.
We will now conclude our ceremonies here at Town Hall with the playing of the national anthem by the high school band. Well, thank you, everybody. That concludes our ceremonies here at Town Hall. I'd like to thank all of our participants, certainly our high school band. I'd also like to point out here is another World War II veteran who I didn't notice before, Paul Berger. And again, Joe DeVito sitting there, just standing up from the lawn chair. So I would like to thank certainly our high school band, our selectman, Mr. O'Regan, Selectman Howe for their words, Representative Galvin, certainly Mr. Highlander, thank you very much, our fire department, our police departments, our Sheriff Sheehan's office, and of course our VFW firing detail and our veterans that you see behind us. Thank you all very much. The parade will now reform for a brief ceremony at Faxon Veterans Memorial Park, after which you are all invited back to the VFW for a collation. Thank you all very much for attending. Thank you, everybody. We are here at Faxon Veterans Memorial Park. Just wait a minute for some more people to come up. We'll have a brief ceremony here, and then we'll be proceeding on to the VFW, where everyone is invited for a short collation. As always, we would like to start our ceremony here with a selection from the high school band. you, our award-winning high school band. Thank you very much. I would now like to call on Selectman Steve Cavey for our opening invocation here at Faxon Veterans Memorial Park, and also for a few words. Mr. Cavey.
Detail uncover!
Today we honor our veterans, worthy men and women. Today we honor our veterans, worthy men and women who gave their best when they were called upon to serve and protect their country. We pray that they be blessed for their unselfish service to the continual struggle to persevere and to preserve our freedoms, our safety, and our country's heritage for all of us. Bless them abundantly, dear God, for the hardships they face, for the sacrifices they made, for their many different contributions to America's victories over tyranny and oppression. We respect them, we thank them, we honor them, we are proud of them, and we pray that that you will watch over these special people and bless them with peace and happiness. Amen.
Detail cover!
So I only want to say a couple of words. I want to address something that's been on a lot of people's minds, maybe not articulated though. And it's a question that I've been meditating on for quite some time now. It's a question of what it means to be a community. Because in a lot of our lives, we call ourselves part of communities without really, I think, reflecting on what exactly that means. Sometimes we say we're part of a community because we all live next to each other. But we're also parts of communities where we're not next to each other. Maybe, perhaps fellow policemen or firemen will feel like they have a community with other towns, police and fire. And I think that given what we're celebrating today, what we're honoring today, I especially want to make a point about veterans having a community of their own. Even while veterans, they were at war together, or they can reflect and understand each other's experiences in a way that non-veterans perhaps can't. But they're also part of a larger community. They're part of our community. They protected us. They're part of our country's sense of community. And when I think about what it means to actually be a member of a community, I can't help but ultimately rest on the idea that it means taking responsibility for other people. That when it comes down to, when you really consider yourself part of that community, you care about them, you want to protect them, and you take responsibility for people that you care about. Our veterans have done that for us, and it's important that we also do that for them, and we continue to take care of them and provide for them and help them, because their sacrifice was immense. They had no idea what kind of risks they were walking into, but they did it. They took risks for us, and they did it because they cared about us, and they took responsibility for us and our freedoms. I think this is an important subject to really consider in our current era, where I feel like we are a little bit separated sometimes. We are slightly more tribal than we have been in the past, and I think that really tears at us, I think, as a community. It harms us, it injures us, and it's disrespectful to the service of veterans who have risked everything and sometimes lost everything to protect our freedoms in our community. I'll leave it at that, but I just want to say, thank you to the veterans of our community, of our town, and all veterans of the United States for the service to our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Selectman Cavey. I will now call on our Sergeant-at-Arms to assist in the wreath laying. Honor God. Prepare to honor the dead. We will now conclude our ceremonies here at Faxon Veterans Memorial Park with the playing of the national anthem by our high school band. Well, thank you, everybody. That concludes our ceremonies here at Faxon Veterans Memorial Park, and effectively our ceremonies for this Veterans Day, the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. The parade will now reform for a very brief ceremony at the Stoughton VFW on Washington Street, in which everybody is invited in for collation. Let me once again thank all of our participants in the parade, of course, our wonderful high school band, our fire and police department, Sheriff Sheehan's office, the speakers we've had, of course, our elected and town officials, and of course, our veterans and our VFW Honor Guard. Thank you all very much.